Okay, so we're doing another boundaries clinic with Dara. Dara, could you please tell me your intention for today?
My intention is to know when I am oscillating in and out of my boundary.
Okay, great. So when you're in your boundaries, according to the wheel of consent, there are specific vibrations you can feel. And when you're outside of your boundaries, according to the wheel of consent, or according to my version of the wheel of consent, there are also vibrations you can feel. So if you just feel one of these vibrations, it's easy to tell if you're in or out of your boundaries. But what might be a more important step is to understand how to make sure you're in your boundaries to begin with, because it's a choice. If you don't know you have a choice, you're just going to be like washed around in the waves, feeling like you're at victim to life. So I'm going to give you very specific steps that are based on Dr. Betty Martin's teachings, but have been modified by me. So the first thing is, what are boundaries and what is consent? So I'm just going to go through this really quickly. Boundaries has everything to do with you, just you and you. So you can be in or out of your boundaries, even if you're sitting at home with a bowl of soup. You're in or out of your boundaries, right? When you deal with someone else, now consent comes into play, because consent has to do with two or more people, and their individual boundaries interacting. So you can see that unless two people are really, really good at knowing if they're in or out of their boundaries, it's almost impossible to have consent, because consent requires two people to be squarely in their boundaries with each other. And so if even one person's like, I don't know if I'm in my boundaries, am I? I'm not sure. Then consent goes out the window, because you need two safe people to have consent. So just like in Buddhism, you practice with yourself before you start practicing with others. So the idea is you really have to be good at your own boundaries with a bowl of soup at home by yourself before you can safely interact with other people. And what a lot of people do is they unconsciously default to, well, it's the other person's fault if I'm in or out of consent with them. I'm like, no, your boundaries, like they violated my boundaries, so they broke the consent. So they kind of put it on them. Consent has everything to do with you always making sure that you're within your boundaries 100% of the time, which is why the bowl of soup practice is so important before you go out into the world. So does this make sense so far? That boundaries come first. Okay, all right. So first, to know if you're in your boundaries, you have to pause. So I'm going to write that down. Because so many people just kind of go into action without pausing, and they don't even think. And if you're in the aura of someone else, they will influence what you think and what you feel. So if someone, let's say someone who has a lot of power over you, like let's say you give a lot of power to you, let's say you give a lot of power to your mom or something like that, then if she's near you and she goes, hey, do you want to spend the holidays in the Bahamas with me? And it's slightly out of your budget, but she's really excited, you might say yes, just because you're in her aura and she has a lot of power over you, because you allow for that to happen, right? If there's a dog walking down the street and it's not your dog and it really wants something from you, you probably have more power than that dog. So whatever it wants doesn't have as much power over you. But people give their power to specific people in their lives. And when you're around those specific people, when they have a hold on you, it's really hard for you to feel your boundaries, which is why it's important to pause. Then you have to notice what you're feeling. Oh, sorry, that's not it. You can see what I traditionally do. I skip this. So number one is pause. Second one is breathe calmly for at least 20 seconds. So you can see that if you don't do one properly, there's no way to get to number two. Like number two is dependent upon one being done properly. So when you breathe calmly for at least 20 seconds, what you're doing is you're connecting your mind and your body. Most of us are disconnected at the neck. And what I would say is your inner mother is connecting with your inner child, because your body voice is what your boundaries are. I mean, we can only talk about this really briefly, What are boundaries to begin with? To me, in my opinion, boundaries are you at your highest vibrational outcome. So it's an orchid that has every single thing it perfectly needs, like the nutrition, the humidity, the shade, you know, this kind of thing. And also other orchids around it that have like a similar vibration. If that orchid is in a plant nursery with a bunch of cacti, it may not be at its highest vibrational outcome because it's surrounded by cacti and maybe the environment that's good for cacti. Is the orchid surviving? Maybe for a period of time, but it's going to have a shorter life and more disease, right? So you surviving is not okay. You handling it or dealing with the situation, I can handle it. That's not okay. It's not you being within your boundaries. That's like the orchid handling the cacti, right? Okay, so I'm seeing some nodding. All right, so the mind says I can handle it. The mind says I can deal with this or whatever. The mind also gets off on being the savior or martyr or rescuer. So it gets off on emergency situations. So when you breathe calmly, your mind is connecting with your body. And the reason why you have to do this calmly is because you can be triggered by a situation for like days. So that pause that comes first, it's not like pause now in front of the person. It can mean going all the way home and being surrounded by your own things, being alone in the house with no one else's aura. It might be being alone for like 3 weeks because you're so freaking triggered. So if you're so triggered for that long, let me just tell you the answer is no. It's not in your boundaries. Okay, I mean, even if there's like a deadline where you have to like sign on the dotted line, yes or no, by 5 p.m. tonight, if you're triggered the whole time, the answer is no. Okay, so breathe calmly. Then you notice what you're feeling. Then you trust it. So sometimes you do something like 1, 2, 3, and you notice that you feel scared. Maybe you feel scared even of your partner. And you're like, oh, that can't be right. So you don't trust it. Or you feel scared of your mom. And you're like, oh, that can't be right. So you don't trust it. Because you have a mental idea of what the relationship is supposed to be. And a lot of people are stuck in time, like wherever their trauma was formed. Let's say their trauma was formed when they were 2. The psyche of the 2-year-old lives in their mind. And that mind is like, well, dad is supposed to be a good person. So if you have any body sensations that say dad is a bad person, dad is not trustworthy, dad doesn't deserve to be in my life. If you have body sensations that say that, your mind won't trust it because the mind is of the 2-year-old saying, no, daddy loves me. And you're waiting for cherry picking signals that he does love you, and you ignore all the other 98% of your life. Yeah, okay, see that. So you can see that, you know, everything has to happen in order and appropriately done, because if you don't do some of these things, then like, for example, if you didn't pause, you can't get to number 2, right? And if you can't do number 2 properly, you can't get to number 3. So number 4 can only happen if you've even noticed what you're feeling to begin with. Some people just say yes without even pausing. So you don't get down to note, right? So then after you trust it, then you have to value it. And I'll say that this is where people F up the most, because they know what they're feeling, but they don't care because they care about the experience or the relationship more. So this fake thing I'm doing with this person, I care to upkeep the charade of that more than I care about my actual feeling. And I know how I feel. I'm pissed, but I'm not going to tell them because I want to maintain the good feelings between us, you know, but there are no goddamn good feelings between you because you guys have discord, and it's true. It's already there. And now you're being evil by caring about the superficiality. Evil cares about superficiality. It doesn't care about the actual thing. Okay, I'm seeing stuff happening. So like, you know, I often use this example, like evil will cheat at the foot race and win and be like, oh, I won. You know, it doesn't care that it didn't actually win. It doesn't even go that far. It doesn't care that It didn't do the training, right? It doesn't care about the internal. It only cares about the external, superficial looking thing. And for evil, getting the gold medal is enough. They can brag to their friends. So being concerned with just the superficial is a sign of evil. And being unconcerned with the internal is a sign of evil. And so if you don't value it, then you're interacting with your own evil. Like you're giving into evil. And you're actually breaking the relationship by not being authentic. Like a true relationship has trust, right? So if there's a lack of trust already between the two of you and you're just not acknowledging it, then you're being evil. To actually acknowledge a lack of trust is to increase the intimacy, actually. So I'll pause there. There's actually another step, but what's coming up for you so far?
The so much. The times that I thought I was, I'm trying to process what you said in order to apply it to the feelings of the memories of exactly that having happened.
Okay, that's a lot. That's a lot
It
of,
is.
actually, no, it's all up here. If there's like a feeling, it's one word, you know, like is
Okay.
something like a feeling happening?
Clicking.
Okay.
So I feel like connected with that.
Okay, great.
Very
So,
connected to what you
okay.
said.
I do see two things happening with you. And, you know, you can agree or disagree with me. We don't have to agree, but I will report that I see two things happening with you. I see like your body having realizations that are undeniable, and then your mind quickly grasping and trying to make it its own. Like, oh, I knew that already. Or like, I can handle it, kind of like, I can incorporate this back into my identity of myself, which is why when I asked what's coming up for you, there was like a process that your mind was doing, you know, to kind of grasp, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm trying to retain this.
What do you mean?
It's stressful because I don't feel smart enough to retain the lesson. Like I want to hold it.
Sure. And you don't have to retain it because you have to, that is the mind wanting to remember, wanting to write down and record and like remember, you know. Every single person I've ever worked with who proudly shows me how many notes they took during one of my lessons, I know that they were not present because the lesson was like overwhelming for their mind. So this, I want to retain it.
That's what's happening.
Yeah, it's like your mind wants to be in control again. That like wanting, because if you're just in a raw open state, that's what is. And being able to hold what is self-mastery.
Oh. Huh. Okay.
There is a pop with that last. Oh, yeah. Like, I'll just say this, because of the time we have to kind of go through this a little bit quickly. It's like, don't worry about being able to repeat these steps back to me later. Don't worry about that. What I would like for you to do, and what I personally think is the most helpful, is to just allow experiences to occur today and trust that those new frequencies are now available to you going forward.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah. And you know, you can see that that's extraordinarily different from maintaining the knowledge level. Okay. So last is then you can communicate it. And by it is the feeling. So number one, pause. 3 weeks. I don't care. Pause for 3 weeks. Let the deadline pass. 2, breathe calmly for at least 20 seconds, connecting the mind and the body, because the mind is usually separated from the body. And what I said earlier is Your mind is like the 2-year-old stuck in trauma who's looking for evidence that mommy or daddy is good or safe or trustworthy. And the body is the one who actually knows the truth with a capital T, always. Okay, so number 3 is notice what you're feeling. So if you've successfully connected your mind to your body, you can notice what you're feeling. Whereas if you didn't do numbers 1 and 2, there's almost no way for you to notice what you're feeling. So many people are disconnected from their bodies. I can't just be like, what are you feeling? Most people can't report that very well. They need like a moment, Once you notice what you're feeling, you have to trust it, because sometimes it goes against what your mind thinks the relationship should be or what the experience should be, so you don't trust it. Or maybe you get all the way down to 4, but you have issues with number 5, which is what I think most people do. So you know exactly what you're feeling. You just don't care enough to defend that in general, like defend that with other people, defend that with yourself. It's like bowl of soup. There's like 2 spoonfuls left. You're full. Do you just throw the rest of the soup away? Or do you go, oh no, I don't want to waste money? Or, oh no, someone made the soup for me and it was like their time and effort, and you force yourself to eat the extra 2 spoonfuls of soup. It doesn't have to be with other people. You can be triggered by yourself at home with your freaking bowl of soup. So do you value what you feel? Or do you force yourself to eat the 2 spoonfuls of soup? That is going against your boundaries. And that's the kind of thing that people do all the time, right? Okay, and then last, only then can you communicate it. And I would say that most people think they're here all the time. It's like something like, I go to ecstatic dance, and at the end of ecstatic dance, all these sweaty guys want to hug me. What's the perfect way to say no? Okay, if someone does that, where do you think they are? What number do you think they are? What's the perfect way to say no?
I can't read. I haven't memorized the list. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. So
where do the sweaty guys think they are?
No, the person, probably a woman, who doesn't know how to say no to these guys.
Oh yeah, she's probably in I would say pause.
She knows she doesn't want to hug them, right?
Oh, she knows she doesn't want to hug them. Then she's what's number 3?
Notice what you're feeling.
I would say 3.
Well, she knows she doesn't want to hug them.
6.
Yes. So she's asking what's the perfect way to say no. So she thinks she's at 6, most likely, right? Where do you think I think she's at?
What's 4?
Trust it.
4?
Well, she knows she doesn't want to hug them. She knows. But she's asking, how do I say no perfectly?
So she thinks you see her at 6 too?
No, I think she's at 5. She doesn't value what she feels.
Value, right.
Because if you valued what you felt, I don't care how you say no. It can be a really mean no, like, ew, you're so gross. Don't talk to me. You're allowed to say that.
Right.
I don't care. You're allowed to say that. You can be a little bit more subtle and kind of like, like, bye. Like, you're allowed to do that too. Or like, not today, whatever. I literally don't care how you communicate anything. I just don't care. And when you are a beginner, your communication will be violent. You're probably so unused to communicating your boundaries. Your communication will be messy, ugly. And I remember one time in my life, I was talking to someone who was super crazy violator. And I was having a really hard time with my boundaries, but I was starting to learn. And I knew that I had to stop this conversation now. She was talking about her ex-college roommate who liked to kill people and fantasized about it. And I'm like, I don't want to listen to this at brunch. Like, what a gross, crazy topic of conversation. And each time I tried to change the conversation, or each time I tried to like gently through social cues, change the flow of what was happening, it wasn't happening. And I was in that situation where she had more power over me in my head, because my ego was like, oh my God, this is a famous person. It was a famous person. I was having brunch with a famous person. So I'm like, I want brunch to go well, right? So all the red trigger marks was happening for me back then, especially when I was learning my boundaries. You know how I ended that conversation? I don't want to talk about this anymore. That's how I ended the conversation. And she was literally scared of me after that, like physically scared of me. And she probably thought I was the violator, right? Whatever. I don't care, because she's so crazy. I don't want to talk to you again for the rest of my life. I don't care if you're famous. I don't care what you accomplished. And I had to be that violent because she was already that violent first, and she wasn't listening to any of my other cues. So I don't care how you communicate it. I don't care. In the very, very beginning, it's going to be violent, messy, and crazy and weird. Don't worry. Like you sharing the weird feeling that is already happening has more honor than you hiding the weird feeling that is already happening and trying to be nice. So
Yes, got it.
Good. So I'll just finish this thought. So the woman who wants to ask, what's the perfect way to say no? She's already uncomfortable. So it's okay to tell all the men no in any way she wants, even if it, in quotation marks, makes them uncomfortable, because to share the discomfort is more honorable than for her to give in, not say anything, go allow the hug to happen and violate herself. Because now it's this really twisted, weird thing where they're not violating her. She's violating herself by using them as puppets. That's the thing. And I doubt they want to be perpetrators. I doubt they want to be puppets. So that's why I say that number 5 is where most people screw up, because that's where she screwed up. She didn't value what she felt. That's the thing. There's no perfect way to communicate anything. Anyone who asks that, what's the perfect way to communicate this? Well, that's a child's thought. I'm so sorry to say, this is an immature way to think that there's a perfect way to say anything. I could go into that for like a whole 20 minutes, but I won't. Okay, so you can see that pausing and communicating it, numbers 1 through 6, the first and last steps, have you to do with the outside world. You're interacting with the outside world. So I say this is your inner father. Your inner father protects the family, right? The inner father's like, pause. My baby needs some time to think, right? And protects you. And then after mommy tells daddy what baby wants, then the father goes, okay, we'll say yes to the party. Or like, okay, no, we're not going to the party. So when daddy does his job well, like pause, then mommy can breathe calmly for at least 20 seconds. Mommy, the mind, is connecting with the baby, the body. So mommy's starting to become attuned to the baby. Notice what you're feeling, which is basically saying, what's the baby saying? What does the baby want? And then trusting it. This can happen. This is a really dark example, but I'm going to give it. Sometimes a real life child tells their real life mother, this person is touching me, like sexually inappropriately, like violating me. And then the mom goes, no, that happens because the mom doesn't trust the baby's experience over what she wants to be the case, right? This happens in real life, and this is what happens to our inner selves all the time.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I just had this conversation with someone.
Okay.
I can't believe you're using that as an example.
So,
Wow.
So it's really important that your mind needs to believe. This is another way to say it, trust it. Another way to interpret that is your mind needs to believe what your body is saying, even if it goes completely against what the mind wants to be the case, even if it threatens the mind's worldview or the weird lies the mind tells itself in order to keep itself safe. Okay, so after the mother believes the baby, then you have to maintain the value of the baby's experience. And then the mommy tells the daddy, okay, we're going to the party and we're going to wear a pink frilly dress, you know, or we're not going to the party because we're tired. And then dad goes, okay. The dad's job is not to attune to the baby so much, is to protect the family and interface with the outside world. The mom's job is to be attuned to the child and serve the child's need. The mom's job is to be attuned to the child and serve the child's need. And the dad's job is to make sure this happens in real life with the outside world. So I would say this is inner mother. And numbers 1 and 6 are inner father. So you can see that besides steps 1 and 6, the majority part of being in your boundaries is attuning to yourself and being a good mother to yourself. So if you're a narcissistic mother to yourself, which is most people, seriously, most people are narcissistic to themselves. There's 2 spoons of soup left, eat it. We don't waste food. Doesn't matter if you're full, doesn't matter, whatever, right? That other person wants us to do something for them and we don't want to, well, we're gonna do it because that person is more important than you. People do this all the time. So you can see that being like basically boundaries, one way to look at it is to mother yourself better than you have been before. And most likely, whatever these boundaries are for you, you learn them from how your mother mothered you. So you are as attuned to yourself as your mother was attuned to you. So your boundaries are only as good as she taught you to feel. So this is healing, like mothering yourself better than your mother mothered you. This is healing, and also it's boundaries. Okay, so we have just a little bit of time left. So I'll just quickly go through the vibrations. Did you want to share anything about the steps? Okay, so as you know, this is my circle. When you're inside the circle, you're inside of your boundaries. When you're outside of the circle, you're outside of your boundaries. That's the basic premise of the Wheel of Consent. And this can't be a full lesson. I'll just briefly talk about it, and it's not a full lesson, but it will answer your question. So when are you inside of your boundaries? When you're like inside the circle, there's actually usually 4 quadrants, and the 4 quadrants have vibrations associated with them. And those vibrations are gratitude, generosity, integrity, and surrender. So if you're feeling one of those 4 things, you're inside of your boundaries, period. And if you're not feeling one of those 4 things, then you're outside of your boundaries, period. And one thing about those 4 vibrations is that you can kind of encompass them as like joy. So if you're just having fun, sometimes like if you have a really high vibration, you can just wait in line at the grocery store and be having fun, you know? And so maybe there's a little bit of gratitude in there because you just are happy you're alive, or, you know, something like that. But it doesn't have to be outright joy. A lot of times you do feel one of those 4 flavors, because those 4 flavors indicate whether or not you're in your masculine or your feminine. And they also indicate if you're giving energy or receiving energy. But that's, you know, a different lesson for a different day. So if you're outside of your boundaries, then usually you feel the entity feelings, because entities eat your energy when you're outside of your boundaries. Entities eat energy. Entities eat your energy when you're outside of your boundaries. So if you're feeling sad, angry, fearful, guilty, or shameful, if you're feeling any of those feelings, an entity is eating your energy right now. And in my opinion, boundaries work comes first. It comes first before literally anything. You can't heal without knowing what your boundaries are. And you can't have psychic self-defense without knowing what your boundaries are. Like psychic self-defense is literally just making sure you're in your boundaries all the time, because your boundaries are your energetic, like wall of the fortress, you know. And the entities will try to get you anywhere you have a chink in the wall. So if it's easy to get to you through your self-image, that's where they're going to attack you. If it's easy to get to you through how smart you think you are, that's where they're going to attack you. If it's easy to get to you through this one person you're energetically open to for some goddamn reason, they're going to attack you to that person again and again and again. So it's kind of on you and your level of what vibration do you want to have? You know, do you want to keep that person in your life? If they always attack you through that person, why are you so hooked on this person? You know, when energetically that is the primary mode of attack. So you need to stop thinking things in the way that your mind does, which is, well, it's my sister. And that's like the end of the explanation. It's my sister. And that's the end of the explanation. Like, that's the primary mode of attack. Is that your sister? What is that? So, you know, when you see it from the energy world, it's a whole different kind of world. And what world does your body experience? The energy world. Your mind experiences a construct it created out of trauma, unless you've healed from that already. Okay, so that was real fast. We focused more on the steps of feeling your boundaries in your body, which I think is more important. And also the importance of mothering yourself in terms of feeling your boundaries. So what were your ahas? What did you learn?
How good the words you use to describe being inside feel in my soul. Like it was so tangible when you say gratitude and serenity or surrender. Sebastian, please give me a few more minutes. Okay. I feel too familiar with how many, I feel so drained thinking about how many times I've been outside of my boundary.
Yeah.
I feel that guilt, sadness, anger. And it came over me this morning. And I'm just really present to how much I know what I'm feeling. I haven't had the context to be aware of it like this. It's like your visuals help me. I really, I feel sometimes a little overwhelmed with how late I'm learning this.
I wouldn't be surprised if you just weren't ready before. Yeah. And now that we very quickly went over the vibrations of being inside of consent, basically the main thing is when you're outside of consent, which is most people, most of the time, most people are outside of their boundaries 100% of the time. Like if you wake up early to go to work at a job you don't love, you are like violating yourself, you know, like most of your waking life. So just the most basic first step is to just practice the vibrations of being in consent. So where can you easily feel gratitude, no matter when or how that is, just mentally go back into it. You know, when you have sitting practice and you notice that you stopped meditating, well, you're still meditating, but your mind went somewhere else and you kind of weren't focused on the breath or whatever. It's similar. So you're like, oh shit, I'm outside of consent. Just go back into something like gratitude, something you can easily feel grateful for, you know? Integrity is a big one. Integrity is a big one for me. That's the hardest for anyone. And that one takes a shit ton of discipline, which is why show up on time. Don't make a promise you can't keep. Don't make a lot of promises then. There's like so much about integrity that actually, if we went really deep into this lesson, integrity is the linchpin of the whole wheel of consent. So that's why I'm so on it with integrity. But also surrender. Surrender is only possible when you have integrity. And generosity. So for some people, maybe, this is a weird example, but whatever. maybe it's not so weird. If there are people that you could give $1 to, sometimes you want to, sometimes you don't want to, whatever. But whenever you are doing something with energy, especially money energy, like really think about, like, you know how like giving and receiving are basically, the Buddha of generosity has that outstretched palm to receive and to give, because it's the same. So when you're like kind of giving money, you're allowing yourself to receive at the same time. That's also like a whole other deeper lesson. But you can practice generosity in the intentional feeling, as opposed to like dropping a few coins or whatever, you know, one might do. It's like the intentional feeling, understanding that this is you. It's almost like giving $1 to yourself. That makes sense. So like wherever you can, just practice this for vibrations, and that helps you leave a psychic attack situation in the moment. And sometimes you need help. Sometimes you need someone to like talk to get into one of those places, to like laugh or whatever. But it's generosity, gratitude, integrity, and surrender. So you might even like find a healer where your whole intention is to surrender every single time you have your session with that healer, because you feel like you can surrender in the context of the session, for example, but it might be hard to surrender in the rest of your life. So this is just the very, 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 very beginning, but it's a start. Okay.
Can you repeat those 4 words again? Generosity, integrity, surrender, and energy?
Generosity, gratitude, integrity, and surrender.
And surrender. Got it.
All right. So we are done.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Yeah. Thank
Okay.
you.
You're
Gosh.
welcome.
All right. We'll chat
Bye.
soon. Bye.